Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to today's episode. I wanted to speak about new cultures, and I feel this is a topic that can relate to every living being, living human being. The title is A Global Culture of Multidimensional Beings. And to begin, I have to unfold for the audience Mr.Within's unique view on evolution. I perceive it in 4 phases, and we are currently in the 3rd phase, going to, in some sense, the 4th. These 4 phases of evolution are crucial to consider in regards to how I'm going to explain culture evolving. First phase, I call it the unconscious world. There was just world here. There wasn't any creatures yet. From the unconscious world, we went to the unconscious self. This meant there was the objective evolution, creaturehood, the body emerged, limbs. Just look at your body, whoever you are listening right now, and see how unique this is. And then we have to consider that this body, in some sense, stood up from the dirt. So there was first the world, then there was a creature in the world, the body, the objective evolution. Then where it went to, this is where they don't teach it anywhere. And I feel because nobody has maybe perhaps found a way to say it like I am. That beyond the unconscious self is the conscious self. That means there was a world but no awareness to it. There was a body, there was no awareness to it. Then there was awareness to the body, the subjective evolution. This is when we became a subject to ourself, whether the creature saw its own shadow, saw itself, its reflection, noticed its body, saw other creatures like itself, you know. Jacques Lacan calls this the mirror effect, but he calls it in the sense that every child developing at some point, they look at the mirror and they notice they're an individual. You know, that means anybody listening to me right now, if you went back to your earliest memories, you'd notice in this life you woke up to in your personality. You know, the body was born, you know, but the mind we awakened in. So from the conscious self, it's the conscious world. And this is the purpose of language. Language is literally the bridge. Now, why is this important that we are conscious of ourself? Because the self is a part of the world. The only thing that remains is for consciousness to be the world. That means technically right now, every person alive, your attention is being a little part of the world. Do you know? And so imagine in a very vast time, in a very long time, we will become the world. You know, and what we think perhaps from this view, in this era of what is extinction, may be transition beyond form. That means it's very strange that creatures fall, like civilizations rise and they fall, but then they rise again, then they fall, then they rise, then they fall, you know. It's as if something is echoing on, or the planet is not tired of its creation. So, when we became conscious selves, when we were in the 3rd phase, of evolution, when we became a conscious self, we named ourselves. Now, this is where it gets interesting. The moment this creature became aware of itself and named itself, it started existing separate to itself. What does this mean? This means that but like it was just the outer realm, and there were just objects, and a subject was overlaid on an object. And right now, who's talking and whoever's listening, I am an object that has noticed I'm a subject. Now I'm wondering, how am I an object when I only can know I'm an object through a subject? Do you know? Now, in this phase that we are, after being named and finding ourselves in the domain of individualism, and this is so phenomenal because right now, anybody listening, you can imagine if you stripped away the name, if you stripped away the language, sound would be meaningless. That means if we went into a parallel universe, imagine where there was no language, right? It would just be people still making sounds, you know? So there is something that I consider to be another, I was saying this to someone earlier today, that it's like imagine there's multiple programs running. And so imagine there is a biological program, okay? And while this biological program running, like the body has a life, your mind has a life as well, right? Now I'm considering the moment we, through the creature, became aware of the mind's life to be really the subjective evolution. That means we became a subject to ourselves. There's nothing more fascinating than that. Any evolutionary biologist can raise their voice. I will say evolution has made an object into a subject. Has made an object into a subject to itself. And there is undoubtable evidence for where is this question arising from. You see, the mystery of what we are is more. And so there is something in the human, direct living human experience that surpasses all media, you know? So I'm saying that when we became subjects to ourselves, that is in some sense how culture, I would say, began being developed, where there was a foundation. You see, culture is the behavior of, you can say, a people's part of the world. Okay. Now, when people wondered, okay, why are people in this part of the world behaving that way? Why are people on the other part of the planet, you know, behaving the other way? You know, and so this was because of how, in some sense, creatures began conceiving the realm to themselves. And there was a passage. Do you know that means? Right now, it's so easy. I'm recording, I'm sharing something, and it's being recorded. Do you know? Back in the day, there was no even writing. It was pretty much one person said a story, and that story echoed, you know, through others. Behavior is always fascinating to study because in some sense it has an outer source and an inner source. I would say how the culture is really like the Buddha says, when you look at an object, it's empty. It's your mind which is imbuing the nature of all objective phenomenology, which is empty. Your mind is pretty much filling it. And that means an artwork is meaningless until somebody looks at it. So we can say similarly that every behavior being done, we will feel like unseen artwork. So there needs to be somewhere where the efforts of human beings can collectively be reviewed. That means it could be this unique thing where it's as if we are bees who haven't built the advanced hive yet, you know. Now, when it comes to culture, I would say it is this weird thing that this is how we started, where imagine a flat plane, imagine a table, and imagine people, imagine an all-you-can-eat buffet, and imagine when you go to that all-you-can-eat buffet, there's people who have held their hands on like the vegetables, and you're like, can I have the vegetables? And they're like, no, you have to become part of the vegetable kingdom. You know, you're like, oh my god, you go to get the chicken or something, and then you're like, you gotta become, a citizen of the chicken kingdom, And so what I'm trying to say simply is that it's a flat, it is a sphere, but to us, in our perception, it arises as a flat, So what I'm trying to say is that we are occupying a space, and the peoples of each occupied space, literally, it's strange. It's like you can say, what is the difference between a religion and cultural behavior? What is the difference between, people in like, for example, an EDM concert rocking out, and I don't know, people in holy sites around the world, I don't know, doing some mantra or prayer or something, It's like all of them are behavioral responses to stimulus, right? So when we really look at culture, it's really how the world has echoed as a subject to us so far, right? And the way it has echoed to us as a subject is because it's such a complex situation where we're wondering if human intelligence can be considered field-like. Because there's individualism, the individual requires to wear clothing. You can't be, like, your body can't be naked outside when there's a storm. Similarly, the mind can't be naked in the void. And so when the mind actually, every person on some level is reacting to emptiness. This is why it's so easy to be compassionate. You realize everybody is subconsciously freaking out. They just don't realize it. I would say that the human story is incredible and it is super strange. And I remember when I was younger, there was something where I wanted to fit into the normal. But when you actually look at the world, there is nothing normal about a sphere in the middle of nowhere. There is nothing normal about an endless world made for temporary beings. It's so big, it's so vast, yet we're here for a little while. It's as if this world was not designed for us. That's how I feel, really, to speak from the mystical lens. It's as if it wasn't made for us. We were made for it. This doesn't mean some sort of ideological position or its source cannot be human. That means prior to the idea of man being man-made technically means unknown. Whether it's the idea of a creator creating a universe, whether it's the idea of an explosion, from some sort of energetic soup. It's as if the mystery of the human being, just the mystery of our universe, is like a chess game where the other person on the chess, like let's say you're playing a chess game, and it's as if the first chess piece has been moved, right? The first chess piece has been moved, but there is no one there. That means we're playing a game where the beginning we cannot see. That means it was as if an invisible finger pushed the domino, okay, or some unknown force, animate in psychological ways or not. Something set something in motion, you know. So think of it this way. Some linguistic professors say there was meaning before there was language. What that means is there was an inner fill. That means the inner realms had developed, but the inner realms had not found a way to communicate to the outer realms. In a way where through sound and mouth noises we could pinpoint meaning. That means imagine a caveman. I use this metaphor often. Imagine a caveman and there's another caveman, and imagine a rock is about to fall on a caveman. The other caveman sees the rock. They don't have a language, they don't have a dictionary, there's no vocabulary, there is no punctuation. There is just pretty much one caveman being like, oh, oh, oh. And as the rock is falling, it's like those are the attempts of something within the being trying to express outwards, you know? That means really we are an instrument. I feel this is how we should teach in life intelligence to children. That they all begin wondering if they're a unique instrument, as if no person like them has ever existed before in this world. Do you know? There is no such thing as students. There is no such thing as professors. There's no such thing as teachers, you know? There's no such thing as good, bad teachers or good, bad students. There is only explorers, efficient explorers and inefficient explorers. Everything counts as exploration. Everything. That means right now we don't have access to this, but imagine in the future, the eyes. There is some sort of collective surveillance where every person can see through every person's eyes, and it's not a big deal. It's not like bothering us as individuals, right? I feel that we are alive in the most unique time. The time where the species is waking up from the slumber of language into the call to multidimensional arms. That means more than people needing to live a good life, you know, or having a good and bad life. It's as if it's like live a life the universe has never witnessed, you know? Sometimes for me it's the nature of just being a small thing in a big world. You feel you're being watched, do you know? That means you could be in a forest in a campfire and you could feel like you're being watched by an owl or something. Do you know? So there is, and whenever you're small and there's unknown territory, there the mind endlessly animates. You know, it's as if it's like, imagine the mind is like the forces of the mind, the way a person's attention can move. Imagine it's like a dragon. Do you know? And this dragon is trying to get through, but the door is locked, and the dragon doesn't have hands. So the dragon is endlessly. For example, looking for a way to the other side of the door. Sorry guys, I just sneezed. Anyways, what I'm trying to say is that there was meaning, right? As if think of the brain being a camera, right? And this creature, whether it became conscious or not, or it was not conscious and then suddenly became conscious, it's like storing. Literally, the brain is like getting B-roll. So everybody's eyes are all, like, it's like the eyes can't ignore what they see. That's existence. That's the nature of it. Existence not only comes forth and not only has its own command, but really it's as if like elemental forces should be treated like allies on a battlefield or co-pilots. This may sound strange, but I have this view on, like I often say that it's like we have moved past the era of belief and disbelief, and so we must become advanced communicators. And the way we become advanced communicators is by being able to pilot in the way where we are not being stuck on a branch of knowledge. We are becoming the birds of knowledge, where the being has an ability to fly from one branch to another branch, but also has an ability to fly in the sky. When I say a global culture of multidimensional beings, that's a point in the human future where human beings, there are all, imagine 8 billion people had, like, you know, I don't know, let's say a majority of people on the planet had jetpacks, and they just went in the sky and they just saw what was going on. Okay. What I'm trying to say is we were just objects, we became subjects, these subjects moved, these subjects discovered the future. Some scholars say that means we suddenly found a way to use time linearly. When we started to use time linearly, our mind started to live a faster life than our body. That means in any moment the person was thinking of the next moment. There was a scene in the movie Chronicles of Riddick, right? in like the Yeah, in that movie. And there was a scene at the end where pretty much the bad guy in the whole thing, the antagonist, was this person who had this weird power where he could be in one moment, but faster than everyone else, he could run to another moment. So he could technically teleport before he was attacked, right? And I feel really that is what our minds are doing. Our minds are living multiple versions of the body in every moment in accordance to how the stimulus arises. You know, what does that mean? That means imagine you're a biker on a bridge and you suddenly see the bridge is just like floating into the air, and you look and you see the bridge has just lifted up into the air, and you were the only person on the bridge biking, you know. The moment we rendered ourselves as evolutionary beings, we began becoming chained to the future of a present that potentially can be timeless. My body's existence is in the presence of my mind's experience. My mind's experience appears as a subtler body to whole moment witnessing, the whole moment witness. I feel in some sense we are just think of it this way, an individual, then we become multiple individuals. The mind experiences itself as void. That's its starting point. It experiences itself as a singular. The intelligence of the being experiences itself as a singular object. It experiences itself as a multidimensional subject. And then, in some sense, the multidimensionality can lead to infinity, or it can choose to come back and reverse back into the void. So pretty much the pattern is unknown witness, void, singular dimension, dualistic dimension, potentially infinite, or back into the void. So if there was a matrix screen and there was a code for this plane of existence we're in, I would say it would just be like 0, 1, 2, infinity, 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, infinity. Do you see it? The code would have different uh, it would have a sort of seasons of dimensions to it. There's this philosopher named Lao Tzu. He says, in order, let me actually find the quote. He goes on this hierarchy of how we get to peace. Lao Tzu says, if there is to be peace in the world, there must be peace in the nations. If there is to be peace in the nations, there must be peace in the cities. If there is to be peace in the cities, there must be peace between neighbors. If there is to be peace between neighbors, there must be peace in the home. If there is to be peace in the home, there must be peace in the heart. We start from the individuals what can I say? Like, we're beings that have become conscious of ourselves. The world in front of our eyes is in a material, physical plane, but we, in some sense, animate this outer world in our inner realms in different ways, and we feel we're experiencing and changing. So I feel that in order for culture to change, people's behavior needs to change. And people's behavior is based on the language that they have accepted for the world. I feel like a sign of having learned something properly means the world will never be the same. Something was added. Something more was seen. We have experienced the individual. We have experienced the unconscious collective, the unconscious individual. We have experienced the conscious individual, but we have not experienced the conscious collective. So technically it means that whether we come up with it now or people forget this in the future, eventually a global identity will begin. That means imagine a group suddenly begins, a strange group, and people are like, what is this group that has begun? And this group began, and it was a global movement. It was human beings trying to wake up their species from language that could never be them. Sometimes I feel like before reason there was no reason. A movement towards a global identity. And I feel the internet caused this. The internet made the first chess move. The internet allowed visual multilocality. Technically meaning that people were no longer just influenced to their environment. But cyberspace allowed multidimensionality. Literally, you could just the TV shows that are around the world. Like, who was it? The actor from Friends, Joey. Like, that person had gone to a village in Turkey, and some random villager was like, Joey, Joey. Do you know what I mean? And it was like this strange thing where it was like in a random village in Turkey where they only have light or something to that degree. Very, very limited technology. They had even seen like Friends. As if somewhere that had, it's literally like a gift from the planet. For me, I can't tell you, without the internet, I feel my whole life I needed to travel from library to library. So what I'm saying is, our technology has already started preparing us to become global human beings. That means this may be a concept perhaps maybe not shared before, but instead of Homo sapiens, we became global sapiens. Our mind's life has advanced, and I honestly feel we need AI. Our minds have an ability to live so much faster just from the visuals. Visualization ability of the human being surpasses the outer realm. That means I could see any object around me, and in my inner realms, if like just by the mere whim I could visualize everything. It doesn't mean it happens in the outer realms, but in the inner realms you can visualize. You can literally overlay an object with a subject. Pretty much we're becoming more global, and there's nothing we can do about it. You have to wake up from the slumber of identifying as an object and trying to treat the subject as an object. That means we're trying to live like unchanging subjects, not realizing it's all changing. I want to share some quotes before I continue from Lao Tzu. He says, when there is no desire, all things are at peace. He says, if you're depressed, you're living in the past. If you're anxious, you're living in the future. If you're at peace, you're living in the present. Lao Tzu says, being still does not mean don't move. It means move in peace. Lao Tzu says the greatest gift you have to give is that of your own self-transformation. Lao Tzu says if you correct your mind, the rest of your life will fall into place. Lao Tzu says with what you have, rejoice in the way things are. When you realize there is nothing lacking, the whole world belongs to you. Lao Tzu says to a mind that is still, the whole universe surrenders. To continue, Terence McKenna even has this quote, this scholar. He says, a culture evolves as fast as its language does. And Ludwig Wittgenstein says the limits, this philosopher, he says the limits of my language are the limits of my world. So really our behaviors are either repeating how language has been accepted as reality, or they are updating it. So I would say a global being is technically a being that is, its value is not based on the location. It is based on the idea of the whole thing. And so really new cultures are like, we're treating ourselves as a singular dimension. Do you know? We're like, yo, I'm just this, from this place, from this town. But now imagine even like the moment we become planetary, imagine if there were extraterrestrials, they were like, oh my God, they finally made it. You know? I'm just saying a planetary identity will come, even a galactic identity will come, even a universal identity will come. And eventually there will be an advancement beyond the language threshold. The effort of the object and subject to become everything and nothing. What that means is the body enters the void, and in some sense it's as if the body is like one hand of the multidimensional being holding the void, and the mind is in some sense the other hand of the being holding the infinite. Do you know? When it comes to my mind, I can only fathom its creation. I can never fathom my mind dying. My body, I can perceive it, it's temporary, it's elemental. It's kind of like as an existential being trying to wonder about non-existence. Can you imagine a philosophy teacher being like, all right, students, go write an essay on non-existence, and then the students leave the classroom and the philosophy teacher starts laughing. He starts laughing. He calls all the other philosophy teachers and they all start running the same prank. And students come to class, yes, non-existence, da 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 da. And the professor's just laughing, you know, the whole time. And what's even more fascinating is the brain is using light and sound to create culture. That means it's like there's a visual dimension to our experience of our world, you know, and then there's an auditory dimension where I would say hierarchy, spectrums, and various things are found there. And this is so like pretty far ahead, you know. Right now, it may not be necessary. Not I don't want to say necessary, but it's like it's like we either remain individual till the end of time. That means we pretty much party and overpopulate the whole universal sector and beyond as human beings. Or the effort of our mind lives on. That means even though man's body may pass, but the mind does its work while it's here. Technically, what I'm saying is that in order to have new cultures, we need to have new languages. In order to have new languages, we have to look at the old dimensions from a new angle. So technically, if individuals start actually organizing their perception multidimensionally, this means that instead of thinking you're just matter or you're just immaterial, the person's like, okay, in front of my eyes I'm an object, behind my eyes I'm a subject, alright. And then, imagine, like, I don't know, I hope to see this. Of course, I don't know how long I'm visiting this plane, but I'll tell you, that if in 30 years we don't see a renaissance, a global renaissance in the advancement of the communication of the species, we have missed out. You see, when you look at history, it's kind of cool. It's like every chapter of our history on this planet has had their own challenges, their own obstacles, their own things to deal with. We are right now becoming singular and becoming multidimensional. Do you know, we're literally crossing that bridge, right, as beings, you know? There was a term, I forget the person who had come up with it, but it was called archaeofuturism. It means a future evoking of an ancient idea. And that's really what's happening. In a weird way, things are globalizing. What it means is, like, what happens when a room gets crowded, the people in the room have no choice but to talk to one another. The urge for communication increases. So it's the levels of communication. You know, we even treat language like words more multidimensional than people. Even though every person's given a name, therefore rendering them as a word. That means, think of in how many ways a single word, in how many different kinds of sentences a single word can be used. Now think of it this way, in how many ways a human being can exist, can animate as a personality, right? And the world right now is image sensitive, you know? That means it's as if we are using the hammers of the past, but really those hammers no longer belong in our hands. For a multidimensional being, an advanced civilization, there is no judgment, there's just additional dimension. That means, imagine, for example, a robot perceiving a person doing a good thing than a bad thing. To the robot, it's just like event 1, event 2. Do you know what I mean? There is no this is good, this is bad. This is one domain of one view of info, one dimension of information, and then the other is another dimension of information. And so I feel that this cultural renaissance can occur if people just keep in mind this idea and start using the term the inner realms. That means when we start discussing things, we don't say, I believe the world is like this, and the other person's like, no, preposterous, I believe the world is like this. Instead of that, we realize that we have a common outer realm and everybody has a different inner realm. And if we didn't have different inner realms, that would be freaky. We'd be living in a world of clones, you know? So everybody's inner realm is different, but in the outer realms, we're in the same world. Now, all the problems in the world is all about how individuals are managing what efforts of the mind step out into the outer realms, you know? And so a global culture is simply a culture that is acknowledging the true nature of the being. That means in the middle of people, like literally back in the day, they would have war paint on their face. Like tribes would have colored paint on their face. It's like we've painted paint on land. Do you know, we've painted paint on the face of the planet, and history has led to war and whatnot. I feel we just have to start archiving all the different dimensions that existence is happening. and eventually keep all these archived experiences active at some point to share them with some future AI that's going to process them all and share us all the parallel ways things are, right? That means like we may not be able to create a machine that if there were actually parallel universes we could travel between them, but we could definitely create like a machine that could simulate parallel universes of like one universe. And really think of it this way. I said global, but it could be a universal culture of multidimensional beings. That means eventually, like in the future, I said in one of my science fiction chapters of my novel, I wrote that extraterrestrials pretty much, that like passports in the future are gonna have species underneath and planet. Can you imagine how cool that is? Being a future human being and you're like at some like airport of like hyperdimensional airport. I want to say hyperdimensional, but an airport where the airplanes can go at hyper speed, and it's like as if imagine some advanced AI or some wisp, like some hologram of like of a stewardess is like, you know, checking your passport, and on your passport it says, like your passport, let's say, is like a thin glass, like hologram lens or something like that. But pretty much it would say like your, I'm trying to think beyond planet species, it would probably say uh, it would probably even say mind, you know, or it would say time, whether the being considers their time exists or time doesn't. That means that imagine we become so multidimensional in the future, they're like, all right, time is optional. You know, that means if you're a person who doesn't like time, you're like, I don't want there to be time. And the advanced civilization is like, okay, this person doesn't want to be in time, and that's fine. You know, that's like the essence of liberty and freedom. You know, because not everything makes sense, but some things are just naturally done, so freedom should be given, you know? Love advances through freedom, hate advances through enslavement. Simple. And I feel that anytime there is anger, hate, or some sort of emotion, it's like something, it's like the person wants to take something from the world. But when you experience love, it's as if like you want to give something, you know? You're like, I'm temporary, might as well. I feel this is gonna happen in names. That means we're going to have probably like multiple names. I feel what hasn't happened yet is having mathematics enter the name. And you know, like there was this movie, I forget the movie's name, but people memorized books because books were being lost. So it's like people can keep knowledge alive by naming their children by the knowledge, you know. It's like when people look back to the evolution of last names, like people's last names, where it comes from, it's based on really what your ancestor did back in the day. And it's just the opportunity for the genetics. We haven't, like you could say countries that are more democratic, they have more multidimensional authorization, you know? Even though there is no perfect system, like the way politics is designed is that it's like no political system would be as up to date as its most up to date citizen. So what that means is it's like the political system changes slower than people change. Yet everything has a value if it can be updated towards the right direction, you know. A global culture of multidimensional beings means that we treat different dimensions to the person. So we have, like for example, sports is part of our culture because it's an action activity for the body, you know. Now, let's say we created activities for the mind, then activities for that which even moves beyond the mind, right? So imagine there was like a stadium. I hope to design this in the future if the opportunity arises, but to create a sort of stadium of the greatest conversations happening. I call it School of Athens 2.0. Trying to see how far the humans can see. That is really the effort of all knowledge. We advance or we are forgotten, the two options of human life. And so new cultures is an advancement with more freedom. Freedom means new dimensions, or the new dimensions were always accessible. Anyways, there's definitely way more that can be said on this topic, but really it's like you get to live in your physical form once, and it's as if imagine you were a master painter and you had a paintbrush in your hand, the perfect paintbrush. It's as if how not only how would life draw you, but how do you draw life, you know? Or better yet, draw upon it, you know? For me, when I was younger, I had more reasons to resist nature. But the moment I noticed that it's like the sands of the hourglass are falling, that's when you suddenly see the value of advancing towards a global, a sort of proper humanity. That means it's like whether you're a good person or a bad person, you know, whether you're a person who wants to control in this world, who doesn't want to control, eventually an advanced civilization is better for any agenda. That means if we find a way to just get the civilization to advance, and let's treat the advanced civilization as a vehicle, so we need to have advanced drivers, advanced users of technology, right? So communication would be us updating our eyes from the inside, you know? So it's like we're updating our outer technologies and our inner technologies simultaneously. Our inner technologies have come to the mystery of the witness. The mystery of the witness creates the potential of viewing various versions. That means anytime a question is asked and the person thinks of different answers or different views, those are probabilities of the mind. Now, the cool thing is that some philosophers gave this a word. They called it qualia, right? Immanuel Kant called it noumenon. And what it means is that, like, in front of your eyes there is the world. Then this world, before it is really coming to the real you, being received by the real you, there's another layer. It's as if we have two eyes. We don't realize it. And when I say two eyes, two types of eyes, not just a pair. I mean, we have in some sense like the sensory perception being received, then there's sensory perception processed, then there's sensory perception chosen. And when the sensory perception is being processed, that is observation. You know? That means these words that I'm saying, they are not matter. They are not objects. Yet they're subjects. So how do they exist as a subject? I think it was Hafiz, where in one of his poems he was like, be like a life-giving sun. Can you imagine a species that is proud to be alive? Can you imagine a species that with a few intelligent decisions advanced beyond the expectations of despair? New cultures. So just last thing I'm going to say before I end off, guys. Let's reverse engineer from new cultures. That means in order to have a new culture, we need to have, let me say it this way. I mean, I drew the picture differently at the beginning of the talk, but I'll say it this way. We have new cultures. Before we can have a new culture, we need a new language. Before we can have a new language, because language is just sound ascribed to behavior or objective, just objects, whether the movement of objects or just objects. So in some sense, in order to have new cultures, we need new languages. In order to have new languages, we need to have new behaviors. In order to have new behaviors, we need to have new experiences. In order to have new experiences, we need to find the unknown. And not just find the unknown, but find the missing piece, P-E-A-C-E, of the world. It's not enough to just know in this world. You also require to know the unknown. And as Bertrand Russell said, charity and tolerance. These are two key elements that as the species is becoming multidimensional, the more we accelerate towards the new, the more we have to be patient, because any system you speed up and it's a new terrain, there's obviously going to be mistakes. So the more civilization speeds up, the more mistakes there are going to be, more reasons for us to be suffer or to fathom anguish or whatever. There's no greater word on this planet, in this world of ours, other than the unknown. That means in any system, it doesn't matter, excuse me, whether you open your eyes in a part of the world where they're looking at things from a religious lens, or whether they're looking at it from a secular lens, or whatever past ideological lens or future ideological lens. It's as if any system of thought, you question, it comes to the unknown. I'm telling you, it comes to the unknown. This is why, for me, it's as if like you really can't put a price on life. You cannot sell the mind. You can write books, but you cannot sell the mind. There's nothing to sell. You know, there's no truth when you are the truth. Another way of saying it was, I believe Osho said it. He said, life has no life has no purpose. Life is the purpose. This moment is not a thought, it's the real deal. This very moment. This moment is where the soul of the world has come to see, has come this far. Omar Khayyam. He says, be happy for this moment. This moment is your life. That means whatever has happened, whatever will happen, this moment is your life. This moment is where your life forces has arrived to, you know. To be free means to remember the eyes of nature before the eyes of man. And to remember the eyes of nature means man remembers he was not man, he is nature. Aim for the new. The world needs the new. Anyways, thanks for listening. I hope this episode was helpful. Much blessings and namaste.